What did the accountant say when he finished going through his 10th tax return of the day? Boy, this is taxing. One of the other things that's really, really very taxing for a lot of people is dealing with family when dealing with their own portfolio. So I'd like to share with you today a story that I had, I'd like to share with you today a story of a discussion that I had with a client. It's a second marriage, and she was dealing with her husband as well as her kids, and a lot of things came up that I thought were very important, and I'll give you a little background, and maybe you'll see something of your own life in this story, and if it's true, I'd love to hear about it. You can go to the Contact Us page at Goldstein on Gelt and goldsteinongelt.com, and just let me know what's your story. If for some reason you have a specific question for me, and it's a little more personal and not something I could discuss on the air, then just let me know, and I'll try to be in touch with you personally to see if there's anything we can do to help you out. In any case, the story is like this. She was in a second marriage. She had a lot of investments and a lot of things which were very clear that she didn't really understand what was going on. And that, by the way, is a huge problem. I'll give you a little background. A lot of what she had was invested in annuities. So do you know what an annuity is? Well, I'm not going to go into too many details, but I will tell you she did not know what an annuity was. And the fact is, the annuity, which was put together by an insurance company and sold to her by an insurance salesman, was one of those annuities. In fact, she had many of these annuities, not just one, that had very high entrance fees. There was a big commission involved in it, as well as ongoing fees in the program. As a result of that, she was actually earning less money on these fixed annuities than she would if she had the money in the bank. So when I began to tell her about this, she says, yeah, but the guy told me they're really safe. I said, what do you mean? She says, well, if I die, then my heirs will get back all the money. I said, okay, that's very good for them, but what about for you? Where do you fit into this equation? And all of a sudden, that raised a very good question. I'm not opposed to annuities. I'm just sharing that in her case, it didn't seem like a really good idea because the guarantee that they provided wasn't really relevant to her situation. And if she wanted to get the money out, there were potentially going to be some real severe consequences in terms of penalties. Now, she had a lot of these for a long time, so some of those penalties went away. But when you're getting involved in annuities, you may discover that they have, if hopefully you get the prospectus, which is this huge book, and you got to read through it to really understand what all the risks are. Lots of investments have risks, and I deal in risky investments too. So I'm not knocking annuities, but I just want to point out that when you're investing in something that you don't really understand, that's not very liquid, that has huge fees involved, and that's actually paying you less than a bank deposit would pay you, and in return for that, you get the benefit of knowing that when you die, your heirs will get back the minimum amount that you put in. I'm not sure that always fits for everyone. And once we began to review this and realized there were a lot simpler investments for her, she began slowly moving money into safer investments, into CDs, or I don't know if they're, I think they are safer. They're FDIC insured, and much more predictable and more liquid and more understandable and lower fees. And it made sense for her. But what happened next? Well, we went through this and we did the math, and she discovered that she was going to make tens of thousands of dollars more in interest payments as by owning these CDs than by having the annuities and other investments that she had as well, which were also kind of complicated. That was all well and good. But all of a sudden, she had a little pressure from the outside. I mentioned earlier this was a second marriage, and her new husband had a lot of different understandings for how investments should be done. And I'm not really sure he was a more sophisticated investor than she was. Frankly, she's not a particularly sophisticated investor, but she's a very smart woman. But he had very strong opinions. Regardless of whether he actually knew what he was talking about, he was convinced that he was right about what was going on. Maybe you know people like this. So she all of a sudden is getting this conflicting advice from family members and who are pulling her this way or that way, and kids are pulling her in a different way. It's creating a lot of stress, both for her internally and as well as in her marriage. And the lacking confidence because she doesn't feel like she's an expert in the field means that she's having trouble making decisions. And in fact, you do have to make decisions. I often tell people who say, well, let me think about it, or I think I'm just not going to do anything at the moment. I point out that doing nothing at the moment is doing something. It's a decision that you're making. If you leave the money where it is, you're deciding to leave it where it is. That's going to be invested where it is. And you have to decide, does that make sense for you at this point? So this was the real issue that she was dealing with. I think that by simplifying her investments, all of a sudden she felt much better about it. By having not such aggressive investments that some people were pushing her into, by having basic investments that pay a basic interest rate that you can calculate on a calculator if you want, or it shows up on your statement. Understanding how to read those statements was very, very important for her. In fact, she liked to get on the phone with me or one of my team members and just say, listen, before we talk about anything, I'm going to open my account up on my screen and I have a few questions about what this says and what this is about. She would go through it. I could hear it. She'd say, hold on a second. I'm going to take notes. She took notes so that next time she understood what was going on. She got empowered to handle her own portfolio. To this day, I wouldn't call her a sophisticated investor, but again, she's an intelligent woman. Nothing that we're doing is so bizarre, so outlandish that she can't understand what it's all about. I always feel it's my job to explain to people what the risks are of any investment. That, to me, seems like the most important thing to understand before you even start talking about what the potential returns are. Because all of a sudden, if you talk about the returns, you get all excited. Oh, look, I can make 5, 10, 15, 20, 30%. That's great. Then you forget to talk about the risks. That's why I always like to start talking about the risks. And in her case, she liked knowing what she had and being able to see it all in one place. So by consolidating these investments that she had all over the place, all of a sudden she clicks on one button, she gets a nice pie chart, sees how her investments are set up, and that really helped her out a lot. I think that the change for this woman is that she's no longer feeling that she's being pushed around by her family members, and she can stand confidently and say, I've spoken about this, I understand what I have an advisor who I work with, who I like working with, who explains things to me, and I understand the basics. I'm not a hotshot sophisticated investor, and no one in her family was, again, even though they acted like it, but I know that my portfolio is right for who I am. And that gives her a huge sense of security. It lowers the stress in handling her portfolio. And that's really what I think everyone should be trying to do. If you're a more sophisticated investor, great. So you can do more sophisticated investments. I would encourage you, of course, to work with someone who's able to help you out, just to have a sounding board when you have a new idea. But that's fine. But if you're not a sophisticated investor, you want to follow the KISS principle. Remember what this is? KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. Now, hopefully, and I'm sure you're not stupid, but whoever it is, you don't want to get involved in investments that are like so complicated you don't know what's going on. One of the things that I hope we do here on the Goldstein on Geld Show is we take important concepts and we present them to you in a way that's not too complicated, but that gives you some real takeaways. So the takeaways today really are that if you are investing in things that you don't understand, stop. Go to a third party, go to someone else, right? Not the salesman who sold it to you, but go to a financial planner and say, listen, I have all these investments. Could you give me an overview of what they're about? I don't need to know every single detail, but an overview, and help me to figure out if they fit into my situation. And the second takeaway here is if your family's pressuring you, you need to have someone who's on your side, someone who is when I say non-interested, I mean doesn't have a conflict of interest, who's interested in you personally, but who's not a family member, doesn't have an interest in telling you what to do, doesn't have all the weird family dynamics that a lot of people have, doesn't argue with you, just listens and talks to you and explains to you. You need that person on your side in order to make sure that you can comfortably say to your family members, listen, I've got this. I don't really need to discuss it with you. Now, of course, between husbands and wives, I encourage communication. This case, because it was a second marriage and they kept their money separately, I do think the situation was a little bit different. I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions or comments or concerns at my day job at Profile Investments, we are taking on new clients now, so you can always feel free to send me an email directly to doug@profile-financial.com or be in touch with me at the Goldstein on Geld website at the Contact Us button. Thanks so much to my producer, Joseph Goldstein, to my chief engineer, Steve Stewart, and to you for listening to the Goldstein on Geld Show. I'm Doug Goldstein. You've been listening to the Goldstein on Geld Show, the financial show for people living in Israel. See you next time.